Greetings, and welcome to the Thirsty Mage. Come on in, have a seat, grab a pint, and get comfortable for tonight's episode where we discuss a handful of new RPGs that have recently released on Switch. I'm your host and man still neck deep in Final Fantasy ports, David Lloyd, and joining me tonight is reviews editor for Nintendo World Report and man who thinks the 16-bit era ended too soon, Mr. Jordan Rudick.
David, in my mind, the 16-bit era never ended. I just kind of live here constantly, I just miss it. I miss it so much.
Yeah, time is a loop.
Pretty much, yeah. It's nice to get some games that do kind of bring you back to that time period, but really nothing. I don't think anything has ever been that good. Still, it's still the pinnacle of RPGs for me.
And our other panelist, Nintendo World Report owner and fellow beer drinker, Mr. Neil Ranahan.
I'm not drinking beer. I had like half a bottle of wine earlier tonight. That's it.
Had to keep your wits with you for the.
No, it's more that I just got out of another podcast, so I had to make sure I was lucid for both of my back to back, my double shift.
I guess not all of your podcasts is as lenient with alcohol as we are.
Yeah, no, Nintendo News Report. Surprisingly, Donald's real drill sergeant. I had to take a sobriety test before every Nintendo News Report, and he'll shame me whenever I drink alcohol.
Yeah. Well, and you also wouldn't want to be demonetized on YouTube.
Good point.
Yeah, that is true.
All right, well, since I'm the only one with the beer tonight, I will just go ahead and say I've got a Noir de Chamblay. That is, it's from the same brewery as the La Fin de Monde. It's Unibrow.
Oh.
And it's one of the first black ales in Quebec that was not made according to the British brewing tradition. It's a Belgian style, and it's if you like dark, this is a true dark. It's a dark beer with a smoky finish, 6%, and it's won about 13. They say they've won 13 World Beer Awards. So based on the texture and flavor, I would say it's probably about right.
David, did you pick a Belgian beer to increase our Spotify viewership in Belgium?
Yes. Well, I saw that we're slowly growing from Netherlands, so I figure Belgium is the next closest country.
Makes sense, right? We'll just do the whole European horn there.
Yeah.
I'm not drinking alcohol. I often don't, as you know. But I do want to cap off, or maybe kind of give the conclusion to the story from 2 weeks ago. So I told you guys I was going down to Seattle for a bachelor party. And obviously I'm going to keep it PG here. But one of the things that I like to do when I go down to the States is buy two things that we don't have in Canada, or at least we don't have these all the different types in Canada, and that's soft drinks and cereal. So in cereal, the cereal choices and the pop or soda choices in Canada are definitely lacking compared to what you'd get in America. So what I am drinking tonight is a cherry Coke, which I know we'd mentioned in the podcast at some point. Just a drink we don't, for whatever reason, at least in Vancouver, we don't have cherry Coke. So I brought a 12-pack up with me. I'm drinking that right now. And it's one of the highlights of my trip going down there is coming back with all these goodies that I cannot get up here. And I just totally savor it. And hopefully I'll get a chance to go down and resupply soon.
I'm gonna start every podcast with you. I'm gonna make sure I have cherry Coke, and I'm gonna pour it down the drain live to start every show.
Honestly, like it's good. I think I prefer vanilla Coke, and I regret not buying vanilla Coke when I was down there.
Yeah, I liked cherry Coke when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Vanilla Coke. I think I don't know the total history. Like sometimes it's kind of fascinating to me to like look at like food trends with different companies. Like I remember when vanilla Coke was introduced. I think it was in the '90s sometime, and I remember like, oh, this is really cool. And then it just went
Hmm.
away. And then a couple years ago, it was just like a part of the regular rotation near
Yeah.
me. And like it's not necessarily like everywhere I go, but like if I'm going to a convenience store, vanilla Coke's
It's not
probably
even
going to be
special
there.
anymore. It's just regular. Like it's a regular selection now.
Yeah,
It's a type of Coke. Like I don't know that you'd
yeah,
find it in a restaurant per se. Like they're not going to say, "Do you want
no.
Coke or vanilla Coke, sir?" But it's just the fact that you can get it regularly at a convenience store or supermarket or something like that's pretty cool to me. So
Humorously, lots of restaurants that I've been to have cherry
hmm.
Coke
Is that right?
as
Okay,
one
that's
of the
cool.
options. Yeah, yeah. It's not once again not every single one, but like that I've seen that happen more often. Although maybe it's more that it's cherry Pepsi
Hmm.
that has become that ubiquitous. But
It
anyway,
would that would be a reason that would get me to come. I would go to a restaurant if it was decent, if I knew they had like cool drinks like that. Like that would entice
I
me.
feel like this is I feel like this is reminding me a lot of like in the mid to late '90s, like drinking bottles of Surge with friends,
Yeah,
and you know what? There might have been times where I was hanging out with a friend. We played some Super Nintendo
I
RPGs.
sure
Like
that
we
happened.
sat down, played some Super Mario RPG and Chrono Trigger. And in 2019, you know what I'm not gonna do? I'm not gonna sit down with that friend and go play Shadows of Adam, a new indie RPG that is a throwback to the Super Nintendo era from Circle Entertainment and oh god, what's the something classic? Is that the name of the developer? Yes, that is the name of the developer. Which is very apt. This is definitely something classic. I have the website brought up. There is a paragraph that starts off at the top of shadowsofadam.com that I'm going to read for you lads right
Let's
now.
hear it.
When you're keeled over, hands on your knees, spitting out the grit that last monster knocked into your teeth, maybe then you'll understand. Shadows of Adam is no walk in the park. It is a new age retro RPG built for the modern era. Challenging battles, cryptic puzzles, and rapid fire plot keep your adrenaline pumping from start to finish in this nostalgia provoking RPG. I will my before I pass it over to you guys, I will say I wish that was the game that I played because it sure as shit was not the game that I played 5 hours of.
Are you trying to say your adrenaline wasn't pumping?
I mean, something was pumping. It was my eyes trying to stay awake during some of these cutscenes.
Neil, you cannot honestly tell me that this RPG is not nostalgia provoking.
Oh well, no, that's accurate.
That's
The nostalgia
accurate. I think
provoking
that's
thing
the most
is,
I think it's the most
but it,
accurate phrase in that description you read for us.
but I think the problem is that it's nostalgia provoking for fucking Final Fantasy Mystic Quest.
How dare you, sir? How dare you?
And I'm saying this as someone who I think has said on the show that like Mystic Quest gets a bad rap. It's not that bad, and I don't think that Shadows of Adam is a terrible, terrible game. It's just it's something that's really tough to do with these retro RPGs, where you do have something like a Chrono Trigger or those Super Nintendo Final Fantasies and Dragon Quests. Like those games are incredible. They're masterpieces. Even Secret of Mana, a game that I've tried to play several times and don't like. Like I get it. Like that game's beautiful. There's a mystery to it. That's great. When you're trying to like evoke that, I just kind of think you can't. Like I've seen a lot of games try to do it over the years to varying degrees of success, and it's not like any of those games are bad, but they've always been disappointing. They've been like I think what you gave this a 7.5 out of 10,
That's right.
correct? That seems like the peak for this kind of game.
I'm thinking of a game like Cosmic Star Heroine, and I think it's one of the closest we've gotten to a reproduction of a 16-bit RPG that's really good. Again, I don't think it's
Cosmic
perfect,
Star
but
Heroine is much better though.
oh, for sure,
I
I agree, I agree.
I and I'd say that those developers, I still haven't played Cosmic Star Heroine. I bought it
Yeah.
when it came on Switch. I've not played it, but I've played some of those guys' other games.
Hmm.
They did Breath of Death, Cthulhu Saves the World, some cool penny arcade RPGs, and what what is it, Z-Boyd
That's
Games,
right.
what
That's
they
right.
seem to understand about retro RPGs is something that I think Shadows of Adam gets close to doing. Kind of the keep it simple,
Hmm.
stupid mantra of like, no, we're going to make this straightforward, and you're going to be like in and out in 10 hours. Um, and also, they seem to get that the mechanics like need to still be engrossing. They can evoke old memories, but like the coolest that like I got to a point where I was playing Shadows of Adam where I realized that the coolest thing about it was I was like, oh, this whole thing where like your AP regenerates when you do a normal attack. That's
Hmm.
neat. That's like the best thing I had to say about that battle system because it was just so painfully derivative of games that I'd rather be playing.
David, how much of this game did you play? Like, I'm curious to hear. Like, I mean, I wrote the review. Like, I've got a lot to say on it, but I'm curious. I know you didn't play as much, but
Yeah, I only played about an hour or so. I mean, the initial feelings I got was that it was very like the people who made it were very much a fan of Final Fantasy.
mhm.
Oh, you think?
Yeah, like and it was just so much to the point where I'm like, man, I wish I was playing Final Fantasy 6 right now. Like
Yeah.
that's
No,
what I
that's what
just
like
kept thinking.
I almost started playing Final Fantasy VI because but I was like, no, I like need to play 12. I need to play some
But
Masquerada.
yeah, like there's characters that look like the one guy looked like Saban.
He
The
suplexes a train.
Yeah, and then there's they had the same facial expressions as the Final Fantasy characters, like when they're
Mhm.
surprised and shocked and stuff. And again, I didn't play a ton, but the music wasn't all that like that was the other part is Final Fantasy 4 and 6 have such great music, and the music that I was hearing so far in Shadows of Adam was just kind of him and you know mediocre. Like it was fine, but it was all the only I couldn't shake the feeling of like this is so similar to Final Fantasy that I'd rather just play 4 or 6.
I guess the problem is with games like this when they're so obviously trying to remind you of a certain time period and a certain game specifically, right? Like the game not only looks a lot like Mystic Quest, but the way you go through the dungeons and interact with enemies is exactly
Yep.
the same as Mystic Quest. It's funny if you're going to model your game after anything. I don't know why you chose that, but I did enjoy playing through the game because we don't get today in 2019 we don't get a lot of games like this that are decent. Like we have all those Chemco RPGs which try to do the same like 16-bit thing but are very bad. I haven't even played them. I've just heard terrible things about them. I think this one's
I
pretty.
played them and you're right
I
on.
think this one is actually pretty competent for what it is, and so I want to give it kind of kudos for that. I think it kind of nails the 10 hour thing. It doesn't outstay its welcome. It doesn't like add all these extra story dungeons you have to complete at the end. Um, at the end, it does reveal all these side quests when it gives you the airship, and I think it's a shame actually because I think the side quests are cool, but it's just too late. Like it's in the ninth or 10th hour of the game when you can explore this world and go to islands you've never been to. You can go back and really talk to almost any character in the game and maybe get a new quest from them or new dialogue or something like that. But you're not really pushed to do that. You get the airship and you have the ability to, but the game doesn't kind of encourage you to explore necessarily. You just kind of have to figure that out on your own, or maybe have that propensity for wanting to explore a world. You do get the airship and you have that power, but very easily you're actually given the airship right in front of where the final dungeon is. So I don't know. I imagine there's a lot. I imagine there's a lot of people who are just gonna be like, oh, there's the like it's literally going into the ground, a la Final Fantasy IV when you take the airship underground. A hole opens up in the earth in front of you, and you have the airship, and that's where you're supposed to go. And I imagine there's a lot of players who would do that, who would just be like, okay, final dungeon, let's beat the game. I've played enough of this game. I don't really need any more. I worry that if I play a little bit more, it might overstay its welcome. Let's just finish the game here. So I don't know. That's where I kind of got to with the end of it. But yeah, again, I think it's pretty competent. I think it's easy to play. There's something about the simplicity that I liked, and this is, I guess, coming off of all these 20, 30-hour RPGs that we'd been playing. It was nice to have something shorter, more refreshing like this. So that's kind of where I'm at with it.
Yeah, the one thing with just that since we've brought up Cosmic Star Heroine is it's very similar in its nature of it's picked a game and it's basing itself on it. Like Cosmic Star Heroine is obviously very influenced by Chrono Trigger, just the way that the way that it's played, the battle mechanics and everything.
I mean, I thought there was also a lot of Phantasy Star in that game as well.
Yeah, but Cosmic Star Heroine, I just felt like put their own stamp on it that Shadows of Adam didn't.
Yeah, for sure. It's not unique. I mean, it's funny that the eShop listing, the opening description or the abstract, Shadows of Adam is a unique take on a classic genre. I don't think it is unique. I think it's a Frankenstein's monster of 16-bit characteristics, right? It's a little bit Mystic Quest. It's a little bit Lufia. I'm sure there's some other thing. I think the overworld looks a little bit like Chrono Trigger before you go into dungeons and stuff like that. So you get this mishmash of things, but it doesn't necessarily take the best qualities of these games. It's just meant to remind you of them, maybe, or meant to make you feel like, yeah, this. I mean, this game could have come out on the Super Nintendo, and none of us would have been surprised by that. Maybe we would have played it. I think it would have gotten like the same kind of score, like 7.5, if it came out then as it did now.
Yeah.
The difference is this game is $15 on the eShop compared to maybe $100 you might have, $80 to $100 you might have paid for it, 20 years ago or something like that. So I think there is something to be said for, again, a brisk 10-hour RPG that at a very reasonable price and isn't terrible. Like, it's not, overly ham-fisted. It doesn't overstay its welcome. It has some fun combat mechanics, and there's an ease to it. There's a kind of a pick up and play feel. Like, if you've played any of these older RPGs before, you can get right into this. You're not going to get lost or anything like that. It's very straightforward.
Yeah, like I don't really have that much more to say on it. Like I agree with you that it's not like it's terrible. It's just that, like, I feel like it's like almost like I feel like we should expect and demand more out of RPGs.
Well, I guess that means it's time to dissect what was my favorite indie in the past few weeks, and that is Masquerada: Songs and Shadows, and this is released first week of May. I think it was May the 9th. And this is by an indie game by Witching Hour Studios. It's a small team of about 15 people out in Singapore, actually. And the type of game, so this is, again, going on the theme of picking a existing game that's popular. So this plays in the Diablo style, where you're running down on an isometric map, and you have auto attacks as you level up. You have signature attacks that use like AP or magic or whatever you want to call it, that has meters that have to regenerate while you fight. I really view this as more of an adventure novel with Diablo battles, because you're not coming to play a Diablo style fighting game like this. That's not why you would want to play this game. The reason you'd want to play this game is for the incredible writing, story, and some of the best voice acting found. Like, for an indie game, it's outstanding. Like, I would say this is like big publisher quality voice acting, and in many cases even better than some of them. The voice actors were terrific. They down to a character. Like, even the secondary characters that aren't playable, that are just kind of on the fringe, even their voice acting was terrific. And I found the story very compelling. I guess the way to break it down is that there's this big city that's kind of broken up into a number of guilds, and the ruling class, or the elite, the bourgeoisie, they have power. Their basis of power comes from these masquerades. So they're masks that imbue the user with a magical power. So because they have these masquerades, they can basically control society. And each of the guilds has their own masquerades, so that it's kind of broken down a bit. And there's a group called the Mask Runners, who are I believe they're kind of like your proletariat, I guess. Get their hands on their own supply of the masquerades, and basically have started an insurgency. And so you're basically following the story of this basically playing out. So you're playing as a character who, his brother was actually the leader in the prologue of the game. I can't actually remember his name, but the brother is leading this proletariat on a siege of the main castle of the city. and he ends up being killed in combat. And because the brother that you play as, Cicero, he essentially just turns a blind eye. He doesn't help his brother, but he doesn't stop his brother, so he's cast out of the city in disgrace. And 5 years later, he's asked to come back by the ruling class to find I guess he's kind of like a scientist who's been researching this source of power that the ruling class and the mask runners have found. And it's basically it starts off as this kind of small investigation and leads to this very large conclusion that involves the entire city. And it's I just found it compelling from start to finish. Like, maybe the first couple hours was a little bit slow as you're being introduced to the world. Like, you're essentially getting your bearings and you're meeting everyone. But once everyone comes together and the pieces are starting to fall into place, I just found it is a very interesting story. Like I said, great writing. All the characters had great arcs, and I was very satisfied by the ending.
David, I'll start with something that you did a really good job kind of describing what the game is, and I think what its strengths are for sure. You weren't able to come up with Cicero's brother's name. It's Cyrus, and I don't blame you for that at all, because I think there's an issue with this game, at least that I had, where so many names of different things are thrown at you, different guilds, different groups of people, different I don't know, elements of the world, names of characters, and they all have kind of an Italian tinge to them, right? Or they seem to be Italian or Venetian names. Right? And I think that I can't. It was very hard to keep things straight as a player who doesn't like to read the lore that you come across. And I know you pointed out that there's so much story that comes out of the lore. If you do not read the lore that you come across, I think it's very easy to get lost in the game in terms of the story, in terms of who people are and what's happening where. I think you're right. I think you do miss a lot of the story if you do not read the lore that you pick up. And it's very much optional, right? You can go and pick it up in the world if you want to. You do not have to. Or it kind of pops up on screen and you have the option of reading the lore as you go. Like, you meet a new character, then a lore entry pops up, and you really, the game won't necessarily give you a great introduction to the character or who they are. You do have to read that lore to figure out I think figure out what's going on here and who you're working with, who you're working against. And I guess that just kind of clashes with my personal style. I don't play a game like Skyrim and go around reading all the books. Even in a game like Diablo, if there's tombs or side things that pop up, notes or things, if there's a lot of them, I'll start skipping them, because I would rather just go through the story and hope that it presents enough to me as it is. If I have to do a lot of kind of extra background reading, it does kind of lose me a little bit. So that was one of my gripes with the game, is I feel like to really engage with the story fully, you do have to be open to reading a lot of the lore that you come across, and that just wasn't hooking me.
I heavily co-sign that. I realized what that game was doing, where it was just that, like, oh no, like, we're telling you that there's a new entry about this character, go read it. And I'm like, no, game, like, tell me who this character is. I don't want to have to go. Like, okay, writing's pretty good, because I did, for the sake of this podcast, I did the work. I read some of these things, because like a lot of it's written from the perspective of Cicero, the main character, and like that's neat. But I don't like it when games do that. If you do it, it needs to be extra or particularly compelling. Like, I looked at something like Skyrim, all that stuff is just hideously extra stuff that, yeah, if you're really into that world, you can go dive into it. You don't have to. Or something like Metroid Prime's Logs, where that's how you get the majority of that story. You can play that game pretty much entirely without paying attention to any of the stuff that you're scanning. But also, when you scan it in-game, which, once again, kind of an optional thing, it, like, pops up as a blurb on the screen while you're doing it. With this, it's so in the background. It requires so much, like, player agency, completely divorced from the flow of the game, to go and read all this.
And you are constantly bombarded with this lore. You're getting it all the time. At the beginning of a new chapter, or maybe when you get to a new location, you'll get 3 kind of notifications. Boom, boom, boom. Okay, here's 3 pieces of lore. You need to read all of them, and they're not like 1 or 2 sentence descriptions. They're like they can be a page or multiple pages of reading to do, and it does kind of interrupt the flow of I guess not just the story, but just kind of moving through the physical world. If every time I get to a new room, I'm either being giving lore, or there's kind of little markers, icons on the world map or on the screen where I can run over and grab some lore and then go and read that. You do, I mean, this is almost a visual novel in a way, that you do have so much to read through to make progress or to really get it. And yeah, it just doesn't work for me. Like a game like Skyrim, we were going to keep referring to that. You don't have to read the books. There are tons of books in Skyrim. You do not have to read them to enjoy or to get through the story of Skyrim. It's all very much extra and background, and if it's there if you want it, which is great. But here, I don't think it's there necessarily if you want it. I think you kind of do need to read it, or you're gonna lose a lot.
You can skim it.
Fine, but you have to access it.
You still have to interact with it.
Yes, yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah, you do have to interact with it, but you don't have to. If you start skipping a few of them, it's not gonna I think there's one in the library or actually the Hall of Songs, where it's you can pick up a history of the Canticles, which are basically just eras of time in the game. I mean, you don't really need to know what happened in those Canticles to understand.
But how are you supposed to know which ones to skip and which ones not? Right? They're all kind of labeled the same purple color. There's no like this. Oh, you must read this lore, and then they put it at the top of your chart or something, right? Everything seems equally, valuable or maybe obscured or something like that. There's no clear hierarchy of which lore is more important than others.
But even divorced from the story, which this isn't really a game when you divorce it from the story, like just the overall flow of the game is a lot of
loading,
point to point. Yeah, it's there's so much loading, and it's like horrible. It's basically like go to this room, like maybe like press some buttons, maybe get in one fight, maybe talk to a dude, and then go walk to another area. Then repeat, and yeah, you do have the connective tissue of the plot moving forward and everything. But for the couple hours that I played, it was so much point A to point B with like very minimal stuff in between those points, which just it made the whole game drag. Where if the game, not saying it has to be more action focused or anything, because this is very much a game all about telling its story. But if it was a little more quicker paced, maybe I would have been encouraged to go check out some of that highly necessary lore.
Yeah, it's funny with Jordan bringing up like the visual novel aspect, because that's where my enjoyment came from, is viewing it as a visual novel. Like the fighting in between, I just felt it was just a necessary. I just got to do this, and I get to find out more of the story. Like the fighting was a chore. The going from place to place was a chore.
The fighting's also just kind of bad.
Yeah, like it opens up more later on in the game when you're able to open up those, like you get the skill points to open up the different abilities. So it becomes more, because you can get up, like you can equip up to 4 different abilities, and there's some pretty neat ones. Like there's one where he's like spinning in the air for about 10 seconds. There's one where you can send a magical raccoon after people. So and then there's like ice walls and that sort of thing. So there's
like it seems like and there is a way to like get the characters to pair well together, but it's just that it almost felt like so I know like when I was playing it, I didn't really make the connection to Diablo until you did. For me, it more felt like they tried to make Xenoblade combat, but bad and in 2D.
I can see a little bit of that, Neil. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or at least Xenoblade 1, not necessarily 2. Because that's like with the auto attacking and then like using skills and cooldowns. Like it kind of reminded me of that, but it.
And there are the elemental tags, which are kind of like where you would combo off of in Xenoblade, right? So that makes a lot of sense, actually.
Yeah, But like even still, like Shadows of Adam before it, this was a game that it was a battle system that just made me think of better battle
Mhm.
systems.
Yeah, I agree. Like the loading in the battle is what holds it back. But I just found the story was too compelling to ignore. Like it's just it over the great story and voice acting for me anyway, because that's what I was
Yeah,
focusing on. Completely overshadowed its misgivings.
I will say voice acting is
It's
incredible,
so it's so
like
good.
top tier. Like I'd watch this as like a show.
Well, and it's if they turned that into an actual visual novel, if they really shortened the loading and the fighting, if they just made it almost completely visual novel with maybe some choices or something and a couple branches or something, I almost wonder if it would be better just to go that way. Like, don't like you're not gonna the combat's not gonna be as good. Like if you're looking for the combat, just play Diablo 3
Hmm.
because they do it well. So take
Or Xenoblade,
or Xenoblade and
they do
just
it well
just
too.
take that out and just create a pure visual novel with that voice acting and story, and it would have been great. And it's funny too because I haven't looked into it, but they've certainly left the door open for a sequel.
I think this is really interesting that we're getting to this point where we're looking at an RPG. I mean, the developers are referring to this as a tactical RPG, and I don't know. I don't think playing it like that is very enjoyable. I would recommend if people are interested in this game, put the difficulty on the easiest one you can, and just skate through the combat because I think overall the gameplay just doesn't serve the story very well. It's more of a barrier to the story. It just gets in the way of it, frankly, and I just don't find it that compelling. You get into the combat, you do the different abilities. Nothing really looks flashy. You see the damage numbers appearing over the enemies. Nothing really stands out about it. You don't feel like you're doing a lot of work in the combat. You're kind of just watching things unfold. I never felt like I had all that much agency. And I was playing on the normal difficulty. I'm tempted to kind of go if I do. I'm about halfway through the game, I think. David, how many acts are there?
Ooh,
Four or
I don't remember
five?
then. Four, yeah, I think there's four actually,
Yeah.
because I'm pretty sure it was the end of Act 4.
Okay, so yeah, a little bit less, or around halfway through the game, and I do want to see the end of that story because I know you've really spoken its praises. But I would definitely turn down the combat difficulty or just difficulty of the game to easy because I don't care about it at all. I just want the combat to be over. Another concern in terms of gameplay is the fact that you go to these cool environments and it looks like you could explore them, but there's really nothing there. Sometimes you pick up a few lore points or lore entries by exploring a little bit, but you're not really rewarded for exploring. There aren't really NPCs you can talk to or anything like that. So I don't know why it even gives you that freedom to move from point A to point B. In some situations, there's nothing served by doing that. I wish they would just situate you or automatically move you to the next story beat or the next person you are actually able to interact with. Sometimes it puts you like
Yeah,
outside a building, like the carriage lets you outside a building, and then your next movement is to the front door of the building. But there's nothing gained by doing that. Like it just seems kind of wasteful, you know?
yeah. The only thing they really did was you can find other masquerades, like they call them raw
Yeah,
masquerades.
yeah. I found a couple of those.
Yeah, that you could find a couple of those, and then the twins that basically shuttle you from place to place.
Hmm.
They know how to activate the masquerades so that you can. So if you've chosen like, it just gives you other access to other powers and
Hmm.
power ups and stuff.
Yeah, it just improves your alt ability, right? Or gives you a different alt. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. And I mean, it's minimal at best. Like, and I mean, if I was going to describe the environment, I would just call it
Hmm.
corridors. Like, it's just a series of corridors. There's really, like, like you said, very minimal exploration, and it's not.
And it sucks because it looks really cool. It looks really like the art style is really
Hmm.
neat. The world looks cool, and it's painfully boring in spots.
Yeah, like there's a few areas that they visit that are the most. It's the stuff the historical
Hmm.
places, like they find areas that have kind of been lost to time, and those are the
Yeah,
most impressive and the best to look at. But I mean, like when you're in the White Spire, for example, like you're just kind of walking through a generic looking medieval castle. So there's not much to look at there. And then there's like sewers and stuff. So it's kind of a lot of generic mixed in with nice. But like you said, I would prefer that they just minimize that and focus on the story. Like, go with your strength.
I think I really would have enjoyed this game a lot if it were actually a visual novel with some decision making, maybe a little bit of movement or some optional character interaction with your party members or something like that. I could do without the combat, and I could do without kind of exploring boring environments or environments where there wasn't really much to do. I think just kind of expediting that process and like you said, David, playing towards your strengths, which are clearly the voice acting and the story, and some of the environments that you explore a little bit or you encounter. Very interesting just that we've gotten to that point when discussing a game like this, that we could say if this were a very different genre or just presented itself very differently, I think Neil and I might both like it a lot more, or maybe feel the same way you did about it.
Like, I'll give it this, and it's way more ambitious and interesting than Shadows of Adam.
For sure.
It just is, and also as far as games that it reminds me of, like the Banner Saga is really good, guys. All 3 games, great.
I gotta get to
I mean, that combat is similarly not the best part of the game. And definitely in the especially in Banner Saga 1, it's very weak. It gets a lot better over the other 2 games of the trilogy, but that is a lot more riffing on Fire Emblem than like kind of Diablo, Baldur's Gate, or whatever. But I like the world there. Like, I think what Banner Saga, where Banner Saga succeeds and Masquerade fails, is that Banner Saga is a very familiar world. Like, it's Lord of the Ringsy, it's Game of Thronesy. Like, you can it's not that tough to get that. There are so many parallels that you can kind of like settle into Banner Saga without knowing too much of the context of the world. Whereas Masquerade, I feel like there isn't a common language to what this world is, so it's a lot harder to get into it.
Well, we've got one more indie RPG that has some mixed feelings between the 3 of us as well.
Yeah, so this last game is SteamWorld Quest, which now it's David's turn to bitch about a game.
That's right. Yes.
And bitch, I will.
Jordan and I are both very positive on this game. Jordan, when you reviewed it, you gave it a 9 out of 10. I did not review it. If I were to review it, I probably would have been a little less positive, like an 8 out of 10 or something. I think there are elements where it kind of falls short, but on the whole, it's just like it's a nice little game. And David, you didn't like it at all. But I'd say in kind of the reverse of Masquerade, this is a game that focuses a lot more on mechanics over story. I think the story is just a nice thing in the background. I think the mechanics of the card battling system is the heart and soul of this game, and that flexibility and customization of that made it a lot of fun to play.
Yeah. Well, Jordan, do you want to discuss what it's about and why you enjoy it?
Sure. So SteamWorld Quest is it's very much an RPG. You are a knight and you are kind of completing quests. There's an overarching story where you're hoping to join a guild. You're playing as a character Armalee. She wants to join a guild. She wants to kind of prove herself. And you get back to your town after kind of searching for mushrooms in the forest or something like that. You get back to the town. The town is on fire. You have to figure out what's going on. There's a kind of a larger evil force at work, and you end up kind of tracking them throughout the game until you eventually find them and defeat them. You have a party of 3. You have a knight, a spellcaster, and kind of a healer / a tank kind of character. So it's got those kind of archetypes working for it. But the combat system, like you're saying, Neil, is it's definitely the most unique of the 3 games that we've talked about tonight. And it's got a depth to it. I think there's a lot of strategy involved. You are every character that you have gets 8 action cards in their deck. and you are dealt from those 24 cards, you are dealt 6 cards kind of at random at the beginning of each round of combat. Sorry, at the beginning of when you enter combat. By choosing 3 actions from one character, you can allow them to do a special 4th kind of combo action, which I really enjoyed. I thought that was really cool. The spellcaster Copernica, what the kind of special combo attack she starts with gives everyone a mana shield, and I kind of rode that mana shield throughout the whole game. I thought it was really powerful.
It's a good mana shield.
Yeah, it's really helpful later on, especially when you get poisoned or other status effects like bleeding affect you, and you're kind of losing health every turn. You can kind of just keep pumping up that mana shield as long as you get Copernica cards in your hand of 6, and that's I think that's one of the ways I was able to be successful. I really enjoyed this combat because you keep picking up new cards as you play throughout the game. You eventually meet a merchant that allows you to craft new cards as well. So yes, your characters can choose 8 cards for themselves, but they end up having over maybe 12 or 16 different cards to put into those 8. So I should say 16 different types maybe. So there's so much flexibility to what you can bring to the table with your 3 characters, and then you eventually meet 2 other characters as well. The combat opens up a little bit more as certain cards allow you to combo with other characters too and do special attacks that way. So yeah, I mean, what really made this game a 9 out of 10 for me is that I found the combat so fun throughout the game. I think it's a little bit difficult, and the bosses can seem kind of damage spongy at the beginning of the game before you get a lot of these cards. But as you acquire bigger decks, you can really come up with some neat strategies for how to proceed. David, you played a little bit of the game. How did you find it? I know you weren't as high on it as we were, but what kind of held you up about it?
So I got about 2/3 of the way through the game, I guess I would say, because I think it was chapter 10 or 11 I got to.
Oh, that's more than I thought. I thought you'd only played like an hour or 2, so that's good.
Oh, no, I probably put in about 6 hours maybe
cool.
or so.
Yeah, that's good.
So I guess I'll start my critique off of Quest with just showing my love for SteamWorld Heist. Yeah. SteamWorld Heist is actually one of my favorite games. I really enjoyed the world and the strategy behind. I mean, it's procedurally generated levels where it's more like a tactical kind of shooter game, but it's in the same world. It uses the same humor, and I couldn't help but compare Quest to Heist while I was playing. And there was just so much difference that I just felt like it wasn't anywhere near the same level. Like, for my biggest problems with Quest was that there was really no environment. The way that you go through Quest is that it's like little squares of where you kind of run from one side to the square to the other side. There's nothing to really look at. It's all kind of generic SteamWorld. Like, if you played a SteamWorld game, you know what the environment looks like. There were only like a handful of character sprites. Like, they were being reused, and so there wasn't really a whole lot going on there. The script is SteamWorld quality. Like, if you enjoy the SteamWorld, humor and writing, and you'll probably enjoy it. But to me, it just felt the same. Like, I even think there might have been a couple jokes that were used in Heist that were reused in Quest.
Right.
So it didn't feel unique to me, like the writing, and then the story was kind of your standard RPG fare.
Yeah.
So, I mean, everything outside of the combat to me was just kind of generic and not like it was cool when I played Heist, and I appreciated Heist more, but now it's like I've played that and it's not done as well. So I agree with you on the combat. Like, the card system is good. My critiques of the card system would be is that kind of the piddly characters that you should be just running gunning through.
Yeah.
Just, they felt like they took too long. It's like you got to the point where it's like, okay, this should have taken about half the time it should have. And then the boss fights, like you said, a few at the beginning were so damagey spawn. Like, I think I probably was like 20 minutes or a half an hour on one boss. and it was just like, this is too long. Like it's just relying too much. Like I like the randomness. I think they structured the combat system very well, but it was, when you're in a battle for like 20 to 30 minutes, it just felt like every hand was the same. It was like, okay, I'm essentially trying to do the same thing.
Did you use the fast forward button?
Yeah, there was the speed. Yeah, you could speed through, but I mean, it's still like the same thing. Like it's okay. Here's 6 cards. While I'm trying. I'll have to, like, if I don't have the shield, I have to get Copernica's 3 things so I can get a shield. Okay, now that I got that, well, now let's try Armadillo's to get 3 of hers, and then it just felt like I was doing the same, and every battle felt the same. Like, yes, you do get new cards that give you new abilities, but it just felt like my strategy was always the same. It was always maintain a defense and then attack, maintain a defense and then attack.
I think that's where I guess it's the way that the game laid it outside to you, so it's not entirely on you, the player. I think you're playing the game wrong. Like, I think maintaining a defense and attack is a way to make that game drag and be super slow. Yeah. I wound up almost probably in response to Jordan saying that he rocked the same 3 characters the whole time. Once I got all of the 5 playable characters, I almost constantly would rotate out who my 3 were. Although I would have to kind of make sure I had the 2 characters that have an array of healing would usually be in my party in some respect. And I would kind of maybe I would have one character depending on if it was like a boss coming up or not. I might have one character that is ostensibly almost entirely healing. But my other characters, I'd just be very aggressively attacking. And doing that made a lot of those... I kind of realized over the course of the game, the generic battles went by a lot faster, and I didn't have to worry about that as much.
So, sorry, I was going to say... I'll get back to the combat in a sec, but yeah, just David, that comparison to Heist, and I'm playing Quest for the first time, a lot of that humor, that maybe that aesthetic, that presentation was new to me, so that's maybe what made it stand out for me a little bit more. But yeah, if you're someone who's played all the SteamWorld games, then you come to this one, yeah, maybe it is, you've already seen this before, it's not new hat, maybe it's becoming a little bit stale by this point, so I totally respect that. One thing for me that happened with the combat, or that I figured out pretty early, is that a couple of the early bosses, Damage Spongy took a long time, maybe not 30 minutes, but maybe 15 or 20 minutes to beat them. But one tactic for taking down the bosses that have tons of health is poisoning them. I don't remember the tank character's name. Oh god, it's gonna kill me.
The robot.
Yeah. The green robot who is the tank and the healer. He's got a poison ability that can use, and when you poison an enemy, even a boss, and a lot of them, almost all of them, are susceptible to poison, it does about 10% of their health per turn. And if you just keep applying poison, you can very quickly take them down.
That's what that big robot I'd usually have as a healer, and then I'd have poison, and then I think Super Soaker.
Yeah.
Those are my jams.
That's all you need.
Poison would only last for 3. It'd be 3 turns.
Yeah, and then you
how many turns are you doing per match?
I don't know. Maybe I wasn't upgrading them or something, but I just like
the cards. But you have 24 cards, and that means if you have one, even if you just have one poison in your hand, it lasts for 3 turns. At the most 4 turns, you're probably going to see it, or I guess maybe 5 turns, you're going to see it again.
Yeah. Well, I'll give you an example. So there was one. They were chasing that guy for the key in early. I think it was maybe the 2nd chapter or something, where they're in the cave or whatever, and the guy had stolen the key. Yeah. And so he was the final boss, and he had some big Frankenstein-y thing with him or something. So there was the 2 of them. And essentially, at that point, I had the poison. So my strategy was is that I would try to get Copernicus first to get the shield. Then I would try to get I can't remember the green guy's name either.
It's Galileo or Galileo.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah. And so I would go with there was 2 things I tried to do with him. I would try to get the poison on the boss, plus the regeneration.
That was a good one.
So I I had those 2 cards for him. And then once those were done, I would go with Armadilla's, like, their heroic strike plus maybe like an intercept to try to take away turns from the boss. And it was basically rinse and repeat.
I just don't see how, if you have those cards up and you're constantly improving your equipment and you've given your characters accessories, and you know you can improve the cards too, right? You can level up the cards. If you're doing all those things, David, you should be able to do a lot of damage. Like, again, maybe not in the first quarter of the game, first third or so, but once you get powered up and you've got that poison ticking, yeah, bosses just didn't take that long after that.
I didn't have trouble. Like, that was the hardest boss for me in what I played.
Yeah, I think it was the hardest one for me too, actually.
I didn't have trouble after that, but I just didn't find it...
I think I went into that boss because you had already bitched about it, and it was like, oh, that actually wasn't that bad.
Yeah. But I just felt like it was the same every time. Like, then there was the slime boss after that, and it was the same strategy, and then, like, I just felt like I was fighting the same battles every time. And then it was like, oh, well, here's three little guys. Oh, well, this like, it's not... I guess part of it is like, I'm used to the Final Fantasy where when you're in the like, you're out in the overworld and you hit a random, and usually it's like 1 or 2 hits and you move on. And that wasn't the case in this. Like, you'd get like the bees, and it would still take like 3 or 4 turns, but it wasn't like a 30-second hit and go, 30-second hit and go. Like, it was like, even the minimal boss or minimal enemies were still taking like a couple minutes. And I know you can put like the speed up thing, but I don't like doing that either. Like, that's it's like, I'm playing, I want to enjoy it. Like, I don't know. I think at the end of the day, it's just the style that I had, because it's like, because there was nothing after the combat, like, there was nothing to explore, there was really no compelling story. So it's like, okay, well, I'm here to do the combat. Well, I'm not overly enjoying the combat, so there's really nothing here for me to do. Like, I'm not, like, the game is not appealing to me.
There's definitely that, maybe certain strategies that can work throughout. But I liked experimenting with the characters' cards that I did get. Every time I got new cards, I tried to put those in. Like, I kept Poison with Galeo most of the time, and I kept Copernica's special or her ultimate ability is the Magic Shield. But I would give her like lightning attacks. I would give her ice or fire attacks, and just see if I could make those work, right?
Yeah, just power her up with that fire boost, and she destroys worlds.
And there you can.
Or play with weaknesses, because a lot of enemies, especially because you do fight similar enemies in different areas, like, you can find out, like, oh, like the bees are weak to fire or whatever. Like, make sure I have fire to use.
Copernica gets a card at some point called Glass Cannon, and it makes her so damn powerful that if you can keep her alive, you can keep her up, she'll just take down any level of boss. If you can play that card and then get her a couple of spells after that, she could take down, minor characters or minor minions very quickly. David, I think it's tough. I think you just have to find certain things that work, and maybe whatever combinations you were doing just didn't work out for the different enemies. And I guess that's something I really enjoyed, was kind of the experimenting early and trying all these different cards and combinations and finding things that worked. I think that's really satisfying. At least that's what I really enjoyed about the combat. Some of the battles were more lengthy for sure, but when I found out what was working, maybe after a couple of random encounters in a given chapter, and then I could apply it to the later ones, like, that was very satisfying to me.
Yeah, the other issue I had was that, like, I had recently played The Witcher 3 Thronebreaker.
Oh, okay.
Which is a very similar RPG in the structure, where there's like a story going on and there's an overworld, and you're going from place to place in the Witcher world. But the overworld, there's actual like choices to make and places to explore that have actual consequences to your actions. So the overworld was much more compelling there. And then the structure of the card game itself, I just find in Thronebreaker, because it's Gwent, right?
Yeah.
So you're basically playing Gwent, which is a much more complex card game. Like, it's like with this card game, it's the structure is always the same. It's you're dealt 6 cards and you can replace 2, and then as you go throughout the game, you just can change the cards up, but the structure never changes. It's always you're dealt 6 cards, you can replace 2, and then it's the next turn. Whereas in Gwent, it's so much different. Like, you have a battlefield, you have multiple rows, You have multiple different enemies. You have different units. They have specials. Those specials can boost other. Like one character can boost another. So it's hard. I guess that's the thing. It's like I played Thronebreaker, which has a better story and a better card game. I played Heist, which I felt like had a better story and a better world to it, a more interesting world. And then I come to Quest, and it's like you're a less better version of game A and game B. So I'd rather just play one of those two.
Yeah, it seems like it may have been a victim of maybe just different games that you prefer, or games that did something that you really like about them did it better than it happened in Quest. Whereas for me, like, this is not the type of RPG I play that often, where it involves deck building. And I don't play any collectible card games like Gwent or Hearthstone or anything like that. So when I found a very accessible card-based battling system that I could get into, I guess that really enticed me, or that got me excited. Like, it's simple enough for beginners to pick up, but I think someone who's a little bit more advanced can find that there's a lot of cool strategies you can do here as well. There's also a Colosseum mode in SteamWorld Quest that opens up about maybe 60-70% of the way through. And even the Colosseum has some really cool challenges to it as well, where you start the battle and you're permanently poisoned, or your enemies, if you don't kill them, they will regenerate all their health at the end of a round of combat. So I thought that the Colosseum added some cool wrinkles as well, where you definitely had to bring different items, maybe different equipment, different cards to those battles to be successful. So there was some variety there. But I totally hear your complaints, like, or your qualms with the game. Like, it is extremely linear. There is basically no exploration. There's a couple of chests you pick up that, I think it is important to try to find them so that you can upgrade your characters, but you certainly don't need to. You can get through it, just doing a little bit of grinding instead. And then the story isn't anything to write home about. I don't find
the writing's pretty funny.
It is funny, but I don't know, Neil. You've played this other SteamWorld games. Did you find it like, it's kind of the same thing, kind of same shtick?
I will say this: none of the SteamWorld games really have stories that I care that much about. I'm way more into the feeling of the world.
Like, the jokes were borrowed too, though. Like, there was Leslie Nielsen 1980s jokes.
But why is that bad?
It's not bad. It's just not unique. It's not new. Like, I've heard the "Don't Call Me Shirley" joke like 100 times.
I mean, you know what? It could have been totally unique. It could have just had very plain text, and then every time they had any kind of reference, there could have been a little icon that popped up directing you to a submenu in which there's just, I don't know, several thousand words of lore explaining all the intricate details of the world of SteamWorld Quest, as opposed to telling it to you with some good and or hacky jokes.
Different strokes.
If I wanted hacky jokes, I could just watch Naked Gun again, I guess.
I mean, Naked Gun's a classic. We should all watch Naked Gun.
Great. So, next episode of the Thirsty Mage, we'll be talking about Naked Gun. Maybe it's sequels too.
I know I don't want to keep shitting on SteamWorld Quest, but there's one other game that I compare it to too, and again, it's another game I played recently, which is on the Switch. This one's Thea: The Awakening, and again, this one actually has a card game that I would compare to SteamWorld Quest in that it's a kind of a simplistic system. It's different in so the way Thea works is that there's like this overworld map, which again like has a world worth exploring, and the cards are essentially the characters that you are bringing with you. So it's kind of like a Civilization 5 map in like that hexagonal, like you have so many turns that you can walk in the hexagons going from place to place. And the battle is whatever units you happen to have with you, those are your cards. So like if you have 4 people with you, they have like, they have a hit and they have an armor, and then they line up against the enemies, whoever many they be, and they have the same where they have a hit in the armor. And where the strategy comes in is on how you place them, because it's like it goes by turns, where I get to put one card down, and then the computer gets to put one card down. And essentially, it's kind of a match of wits of, okay, he played that card, and I can see he has these cards in the waiting, so I've got to play my card based on what I think his next card will be. And I just found, again, even though it was kind of a simple strategy like SteamWorld, I just found that game more compelling as well because it was more strategic. It wasn't there was there was a bit of randomness to it, I guess probably about the same as SteamWorld, but I just felt that the complexity, even though it was similar, it was still more complex enough that I found the battles more interesting.
I mean, I think maybe the ultimate conclusion to draw from all three of these games is there's better versions of them elsewhere in some of our opinions.
Or that they each do something really well for one of us, but then the elements that they don't do well stand out more to David or to you, Neil, or to me, right? Like
like that's what I've noticed as we do this podcast. I'm a lot more of a mechanics and systems guy, whereas David needs the solid story.
Yeah. I feel like I'm kind of in the middle. Like sometimes the combat will be enough for me. In Final Fantasy X, like the progression was really, really important to me. I really liked the sphere grid system, and even if the voice acting was terrible, and the story, I think the story is pretty good, but the music's I didn't think the music's all that great. Like I can overlook those because in that game the mechanics meant a lot to me. In a game like Masquerada, like I think it is a really great story, and I want to engage with it, but maybe the way that they give you that story doesn't work out for me. So, yeah, I guess we're all we're all different people. We have different ways of accessing these games and things we're looking for, and there are hits and misses in different ways in these three games for sure.
I think all three are worth playing. I think the one that you pick, like if you're listening and you're like, okay, I'm going to play one. Yeah. Which one should I pick? I think it comes down to taste at that point. It's like, like you said, we each kind of look at different things with the RPGs that we find interesting. And I think if you get the one that matches your taste, I think you'll enjoy it. If you happen to get the ones that aren't, then I think it'll be like a disappointment.
I think it's honestly a little easy to say what an audience or someone listening to this podcast, and if we were to say, if you like this, then take this game. I think if you are interested in the combat and building a deck and playing different cards and figuring out which cards work in which situations, I think SteamWorld Quest is best for that. If you're really interested in stories of games and voice acting and those kind of help you get lost in the world, then Masquerade is definitely for you. I think if you really long for that 16-bit simplicity, that doesn't take itself too seriously,
you can play Chrono Trigger.
You can, but you can't play it on Switch, Neil. In fact, you can't play Chrono Trigger anywhere easily these days, right? You could play it on your phone. Dare! I knew as soon as I said that you were going to get me with that. I'm not even gonna.
Why didn't his mic cut out?
Yeah, then? Of course. Now we can hear you clearly when you say something like that. You can't play Chrono Trigger on traditional video game console, which is very unfortunate.
Right. Square Enix would get a lot of money if they actually. Shit, all they had to just take the Super Nintendo ROM and put it on modern consoles.
I know.
And you could sell that shit for $20 and it would sell a lot. They
would make so much
money.
They've
clearly shown they don't care about the criticism of the quality of the port. So why not
That's right. Yeah. Just give us the DS port.
I mean, I would even take it because it actually does. So I do not own it on mobile. I did follow a little bit. So they had that version. Was it like 2 years ago? That was a complete abomination. Yeah. Apparently, it's passable now. Even if they just took that version and put it on Switch, I'd be happy.
If they put the original version without even patching it, people would still be happy. They would complain, but you would still buy it. Yeah. Everyone would buy that game, regardless of how bad the port is. I mean,
everybody complained about some of the port oddities of Final Fantasy 9, 7, etc. Yeah. That was all sold a bunch.
How cool would it be if they put Chrono Trigger in, but they took off? I guess you couldn't take away the random encounters because you kind of see them in the world. But if they added the 3 times speed, or they I don't know what other kind of quality of life options you could have. But it would just be funny to see that.
I mean, I'd actually say that Chrono Trigger doesn't need that.
It doesn't. It's so well paced. But yeah, I mean, Shadows of Adam, like it's a total throwback to the 16-bit era, and if you have so much nostalgia for that, I think you'll enjoy the game. It's not great. It does a couple things that are neat. Like I think the regenerating AP during combat is a neat thing. There's some cool boss fights in that game. It's very easy to get through. The puzzles aren't all that intricate. Like it's a nice kind of breezy RPG to play if you're kind of longing for that time period. That's if you're that kind of person, then I would recommend you get that one. Something I noticed about the three games, they all so Shadows of Adam is $14.99 on the eShop, Masquerade is $19.99, and SteamWorld Quest is $24.99. So they kind of we kind of went from cheapest to most expensive, a bit through total coincidence, of course. But if that factors into your decision, like SteamWorld Quest is a little bit more expensive than Shadows of Adam, maybe you want something a little bit less expensive, and that could be something that sways your decision as well. So again, yeah, I think you're right. I think these are all worth playing. But yeah, you're just gonna kind of figure out which style works best for you.
And if this, I think we did a good job of explaining them all. But if you want to see them in action, there are reviews for all three on Nintendo World or NWR TV. If you go to My Masquerade, ignore the person in the comments.
That person was Neil.
Sorry.
I feel sorry for that guy, but I'm like, sorry, but not sorry, because...
Is that the guy asking for his money back? Like, he wants you to give him $20?
Yeah. Like, no. Just because you didn't enjoy it, that's on you. I'm sorry.
He's asking you and not asking the developer. That's the best part.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I had fun, and his complaints I addressed in the review, so obviously you didn't watch it that hard. Yeah. So throwing the gauntlet down.
David, I'm curious what's next for us, because I don't know what we're doing with upcoming episodes, and I know E3 is around the corner and stuff like that. Like what do we have on the docket here?
At some point in June, probably late June, we are planning, I think, to have a pod on Final Fantasy 12. I would say that's probably 4 weeks from now at the earliest. Yeah. I'm almost done. I'm probably a little past the 3/4 mark. It is a long game, and I'm like,
it's a long one. It's even with the 4x speed, it's long.
Oh man, but I mean, a little preview to the review, I suppose, is that it's the best version of Final Fantasy 12.
For sure. Yeah.
It's got all the things that you want, quality of life. Plus, it has features that are not available on the PS4 or PC port. So buying it on Switch is the best place to buy it.
Neil, you haven't started playing it yet, but you own it. Is that right? Okay.
Yeah. I have the physical copy because I don't know, for some reason I spent this past week playing some weird indie RPGs that we talked about.
What were you thinking?
I had a good laugh. Casey wasn't able to join us, unfortunately, tonight, but I had a good laugh with him because he picked up Final Fantasy 12, started playing it with me, and his comment was, "I'm paralyzed with choice."
Yeah, no, totally. Yeah. I felt that way when I played it.
No, that's when I actually I saw that I saw that conversation and like shivered because I'm like, oh no, it's gonna happen to me.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, like, because now that they've opened up the job class system and you can assign anything to anyone, you're just like, and it's not even like, it's funny because there's 12 classes, and you get to the point where each character can have 2 classes, and so you can kind of mix and match and then do this and that, but then there's a character where you can actually go and reset everything.
Yeah, so that's why there's no need to be paralyzed by choice, right? Because I think that's one of the things they added to the Switch version is this ability to respec. So if you're not happy with your character or you want to try something new, you can take away their black mage and their knight jobs and just give them 2 different ones, right? So they didn't have that before. So when I played the PS4 version maybe a year or two ago, I was definitely paralyzed because I knew that as soon as I set my jobs, I couldn't go back. Like this was it. So I was like looking at guides while I was playing. I was trying to be very meticulous about what I wanted my characters to be and what I wanted my final party to be. But now that with the Switch version, you've got this nice ability to redo it all if you don't like how your character turned out. I don't think there's even that much reason to be paralyzed. Just choose something, and if you don't like it, change it later, right?
So I'm thinking our next episode might end up being another Jeopardy episode.
Yeah, I can be ready for 2 weeks from now if you want to do that. I already started writing down the questions. I've got all the categories. I'm totally jacked about it. It's gonna be fun.
Yeah, unless there's a listener out there who feels very passionately about an RPG that we've either played or potentially could play in the next 2 weeks, you can send me an email to, it's davidl@nintendoworldreport.com. Or you can just go to nintendoworldreport.com and you can click on my name and you can click on the send email to David and you can write out your request there. Or you could track us down on Twitter @TheThirstyMage and just send a DM or send an @ and let us know if there's anything specifically that you'd like us to cover. We'd be happy to do so. I think that's how we got.
We might be happy to do so, depending on what their choice is.
I think that's how we managed to lasso everyone into Final Fantasy XII.
Right.
Is we had a listener who was very passionate about us talking about it, and it was basically like a feather's push off the cliff for me to discuss it. So. Yeah. So if there's anything out there, let us know. Otherwise, you can find us on any pod downloader of choice. We have just been added to Spotify. So if you listen to music and you want to throw us on, if you've got a very strong feeling against Apple and you don't want to listen to the pod on the podcast, you can just go to Spotify and. Right now we're dominating the Netherlands demographic. Right now.
I wonder if that's Don. Don just gone around and said telling everyone to download the Thirsty Mage. So he's created like a family account for Spotify. He's got like 10 accounts all downloading us in the Netherlands. So thank you, Don, if that's you. I don't know. Exactly. My concern, you were asking for like people to email you. We usually do, ask for requests for games. What do people want to hear? What do people want us to talk about or play along with us? I wonder if someone's going to see Shadows of Adam and think, "Oh man, I would like to hear about Mystic Quest. What is this Mystic Quest that people are talking about?" So, if anyone feels so inclined, don't do that. But yeah, if you wanted to see it, I did. I'm sure I mentioned a few episodes ago that I was dumpster diving at my recycling depot and I picked up a copy of Mystic Quest. So I do have the Super Nintendo cartridge behind me, and I can boot that up if anyone is so inclined out there.
Yeah. And if you happen to pick up Shadows of Adam and you don't have a very good time and you want to chew out Jordan, you can find his email at NintendoWorldReport.com.
That's right. Or you can go to YouTube and tell people that you want the $15 back for the game for buying the game. And I'll be happy to give you David's PayPal or something like that, and we'll sort it out. Yeah.
Well, don't worry about YouTube. Just go to Twitter. That's where complaints go to.
Yes, they do.
That's great. Alrighty. Well, I want to thank you, gentlemen, for joining us for this episode about some indie RPGs.
And, of course.
Yeah.
It was fun. It was fun to just shit on each other's reviews or opinions for an hour.
Yeah.
That's pretty much what it was.
I mean, usually we just do it in a chat room.
That's right,
so
right.
It's nice to just vocally bash each other in the public sphere. So.
And I think ultimately, going on a positive note, every developer of these 3 indie games that we talked about, their hearts were all in the right place.
Absolutely, yes.
They did a good job for someone. Someone enjoyed it. That's the positive way.
Every
one of these games,
positive.
One of us enjoyed one of these games.
For like 3 people.
David, you're ruining Neil's sentiment.
I'm just saying, there's a fan base for all three.
But you're right. That is a good thing, right? Is being able to recognize who your audience is and giving them what they want is important. I think these 3 games have probably managed to do that. If you look at these games and you kind of see a little bit how they play, read a review or two, and this is your type of game, you should go and buy it, because these are good examples I think they're good examples within their genre, right? Definitely not for everybody, but they are made with care and attention to detail for people who want them. So don't hesitate to pull the trigger on games like this, because might be a few things you don't like. There's a lot of positives in each of these ones.
Perfect. So thanks everyone for listening, and we will see everyone on the next Thirsty Mage.
Bye.